Welcome back to KeZaka Stokvel Insights. We're continuing our discussion on Masakhane, a stokvel dedicated to addressing immediate financial needs such as home renovations, car repairs, and funeral expenses. But how can this faith-driven stokvel continue to grow while staying united and financially strong? Thai Vision Media consultant Thabiso Masudubele is here to give you all the answers. Thabiso, before the break, we were just looking at their financial objectives as mentioned in the intro, and they also speak about supporting one another during funerals as well. So how can they navigate that? Would adding a funeral cover or other insurance be a viable option?
Yeah, absolutely. I think supporting each other, maybe just to break down, generally with stokvels and burial societies, support is mainly on two levels. The first level is, the physical assistance, because you do know that funerals are quite involved, and it's an opportunity to help with the physical activities, dishes, baking, making sure that the catering is in order and all those sorts of things. And that's a very important part, because not only does that provide a service, but it almost strengthens the bond that people have. And that's where it all started, where people want to support each other. And then later on is where the issue of money came to the party. And I think that's where a lot of, particularly financial service providers, forget that that's the important aspect, that people first want to get together and assist each other. That's the primary. Secondary is the issue of the money. And that's where then, getting something like an underwriter becomes important. So what we do when we engage with groups, remember we had spoken about how the premium that they have should dictate what benefit they then get, and not the other way around. We then engage groups and give them an objective assessment of what's realistic in terms of what can be done given the contribution that they can afford. So we try to manage those expenses and say, if you are paying 50 Rand and that's truly what you can afford, your expectation must then be limited within a particular range as well. I mean, it's not something that people ordinarily like to hear, but we think that it's important that you're honest with people. Because if you don't manage that expectation, you then fall into a trap where a lot of organizations and a lot of people realize at the critical time that what they got was too good to be true. Because someone comes along and they say, yeah, no, for 50 Rand you can get, 20,000 Rand cover for 50 Rand. And you know that that's more unrealistic. And then come time to claim, those people disappear. They duck and dive, and then you find out why it was too good to be true. So for us, the important thing is to say, get an underwriter. Once you do have an underwriter, and we navigate people towards authorized underwriters, we then identify this underwriter. But once we have this underwriter, there's a guarantee and peace of mind. Remember, funeral cover is about peace of mind. You know that when that day comes, when you need that money most for that particular purpose, you will get it, even if there are 10, 20 claims. But the fact that you've got an underwriter and you've been paying your premiums and following the rules, you are guaranteed to get paid.
There's a term that I've become accustomed to being called being financially overstretched. And it seems like in order for you not to be financially overstretched, you need to have a realistic premium. So here, how can they get to boost their monthly contributions to 1,000 Rand perhaps? How can they get to that point?
I think they can get to that point by reviewing what their objectives are. So there are different things that people can do to increase the revenue that they have, either as individuals or as a group. So when we engage with groups, we always say we engage with groups as the number of members plus one. So that's what you're dealing with. So if you've got a group, Masakhane, let's say there's 20 members, we always say you have to engage with 21. So the 21st is the juristic person, which is Masakhane itself. So a lot of groups then start saying, how can we generate more revenue that helps us to increase our contributions? So different members do different things. I know the other member, they're into suing things and doing those sorts of things. So we then say, if you guys, one of your objectives become a revenue generating operation, which then means you want to do this as a business, how do we help you navigate that particular aspect? We then say, how do you then say, if one of your members has a particular business that's doing well, as some of the members do have, how does the group look at, contributing that, but with the view of getting it to come back in terms of a return on investment, but for the group per se, so that that business that the individual member has, they then invest in that group to scale it. But then they agree that the profits that will be made there for the group will then help around issues of contributions. The other way of increasing is that more often than not, groups have money in a savings account and they don't have an underwriter. So in our engagements, we say that once we've assisted them get an underwriter, it essentially unlocks that money that would be sitting in the savings account, because you then have a scenario where you are relying on, assume that they had 100,000 rand in the savings account as a group, which they look to when there's a passing or when there's a claim, they go and make a withdrawal against that 100,000. Now, once you have an underwriter, it means that when there's a claim, you're no longer withdrawing from the 100,000, but the underwriter is responsible for that payment. It then frees up the 100,000 rand that they have in the savings account to use in a manner that they need to use. We then say that 100,000, you can agree, maybe take a resolution that you'll pay your annual premiums for everyone. So if your monthly premiums, for instance, as a group, comes up to 5,000 rand, you've got 100,000 rand, you can say for the next year, 5,000 times 12 is 60,000. For the next year, we're going to use 60,000 to pay our premiums. Therefore, I'm not contributing any money out of my pocket. But the money that I was contributing, you can still contribute it, and then maybe you then use it for another purpose. And that's how, those are the things you look at to say, this is how we can increase the contributions and the revenue that's made by the group.
Just looking realistically here, Thabiso, because we do know that with older groups, they can be a bit rigid and a bit stubborn. So wouldn't it be also a good idea having to open up to a younger generation as well, who will help them to navigate the digital system?
Absolutely. And that's a function of administration. We always talk about this thing called administration and the importance thereof. So at the level of administration, when we engage with the groups, we show them the importance of making sure that there's continuity in their group. So it's about also, do they want their group to be generational? Do they want it to stop and end with them? And 9 times out of 10, you get the answer that this thing must continue beyond ourselves. And then you then make them realize what a succession planning that comes in. And you use terms that are, relatable with people. You say that, look, for you to make sure that this group continues, you've got children, you've got daughters, you've got sons. You then need to start having a program that encourages them to grow. Because, believe it or not, our children at home actually know how the groups work, because they see parents going to the group meeting, the parents talk about how the group works. So they start a program that encourages them to invite the younger generation and have some sort of generational mix. And you don't thrust them into leadership. First, you have a mentorship program. Normally I know we talk about mentorship programs when we're talking about big organizations and those sorts of things. But you then show the older members that teach your children on the operations and the culture and the ethos of the group, why you started it, so that they also become immersed in the culture, so that even as they get introduced to technology, but they don't lose the being, the original being of the group. If it was based on Ubuntu, technology should not take away from those fundamental principles on which the group was built. So once the younger generation gets involved, and then organically and naturally, they'll then start taking over as leadership. I know with a lot of groups, the issue becomes around leadership. Who wants to chair this? So they shouldn't make it so much about leadership, but about the administration of the group, yeah.
So basically, you can have a healthy balance between faith and financial empowerment.
You can, yes.
Well, that's all from us for now. If your Stokvel or Burial Society needs more information, feel free to reach out using the contact details on the screen. You can also connect with Thai Vision Media using the handles on our social media. Until next time, goodbye.
This program is brought to you by Thai Vision Media, helping Stokvels and burial societies reach their goals.